Hello and welcome to this week's interview episode of the Primary Maths Podcast, the show where we talk all things primary maths. I'm Jon Cripwell. What does it really mean for maths to be truly inclusive? Is it just making sure that every child can access the work? Is it making sure that they feel like a mathematician? In this episode, we'll be exploring how we can make maths lessons more inclusive for every child. We'll be looking at the everyday challenges teachers face, considering simple strategies that you can put in place straight away in your classroom, and thinking about how maths leads and SENDCOs can work together to make a real difference. Before we dive in, just a quick reminder, please make sure you're subscribed so that you don't miss an episode. And if you find today's discussion useful, please share it with a colleague. And it would also mean a lot if you could leave a quick rating or review in whichever podcast app that you're using. We'd also love to hear from you. If you've got a question about SEND or inclusive practice, or a comment to make on anything that we've discussed in this show, please send it in and Becky and I will do our best to address it on Friday's episode. We're also on the lookout for funny or unusual things that have happened to you in your maths lessons. And if you've spotted something for our Maths of Life segment, we'd love to hear from that as well. It's great to hear your stories and we really appreciate everybody that's been sending them in. You can get in touch at primarymathspodcast@twinkl.co.uk. That's Twinkl without an E, of course. And we would love to hear from you. Right, without any further ado, let's get into this week's episode. Right, without any further ado, let's get into this week's interview. Today, we're diving into the world of SEND and how we can make our primary schools and primary maths classrooms more inclusive. My guest today is Twinkl's National Inclusion Lead. She's been a teacher and a SENDCO, and she's now responsible for leading inclusion initiatives right across the organisation. She's also a multiple published author with books like SEND Strategies for the Primary Years, 100 Ways Your Child Can Learn Through Play, and How to Boost Reading and Writing Through Play already under her belt, and more on the way, no doubt. On top of that, she hosts the brilliant Send in the Experts podcast, speaks regularly at conferences, and her expertise has been featured everywhere, from The Guardian and The Telegraph to Sky News and BBC 5 Live. She's even picked up the Nasen Award for Positive Media Impact for SEND, a real testament to the difference that she is making. My guest today is Georgina Durrant, and I am delighted to have her on the show. Welcome, Georgina.
Oh, thank you very much, Jon. Making me blush with the introduction. Thank you ever so much.
No, absolute pleasure. There's probably a lot more I could have said, to be fair, but we'll leave it there for now. I don't want to make you blush. So, Georgina, we always kick off things really with looking at what your experience of maths was like, particularly at primary school, if you can remember maths lessons at primary school. What was it like for you? Did you enjoy maths at school?
By saying my memories of primary school, do I remember it? Are you implying my age here, Jon?
No, just that they may not have been the most memorable lessons sometimes.
Got
I mean,
you.
I look back at, I look back, Georgina, and it was only a couple of years ago that I was at primary school.
Yeah,
And
same.
I remember, And I remember English lessons and probably history lessons more than I do maths. So
Okay,
that's all I
good.
meant.
Just it wasn't. It wasn't a dig at my age. Awesome. So maths at school. I was actually on so I find this a really difficult question because on paper, if you looked at my school reports on my GCSE, blah, 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 I look like I was really good at maths. And I think you'd think, oh, she was great. I got good grades at GCSE, etc. And I would have been great through primary school at it. But I hated maths, like properly hated it. And I still find maths stressful. So I wouldn't call myself good at maths, even though on paper I probably look like I am. I think I can try really hard at maths and get it to work, but I do have to try a lot harder than I think other people. I don't know if that's true, but it feels like I have to try a lot harder than other people do. And I think the thing about maths that I don't like, and I appreciate this is a maths podcast and I shouldn't be bashing maths, but the thing I don't like about
I do it all the time, so don't worry about it. It's fine. Go for it.
Oh, excellent. Brilliant. Well, the thing I don't like about it is it's either right or wrong and there's no sort of wiggle room. And I don't like the pressure of getting stuff wrong in front of other people. I like to be right. So I think that with everything else, like English or other topic, maybe not history so much because your dates kind of do matter, but I feel everything else I can talk my way out of it. Whereas maths, it's like, no, Georgina, you're wrong. And I think that side of it, I don't like.
No, I can empathise. I didn't enjoy maths at school either, and definitely felt like I had to work a bit harder at it. I'd probably challenge the idea that it's always black and white, right and wrong. There's a lot that we do around reasoning and problem solving, trying to come at things from different angles. But ultimately, you're probably looking for a particular answer that's in the teacher's head a lot of the time, aren't you? So, yeah, I appreciate that and the pressure that you feel to try and get that right, especially in front of other people.
I was good at memorising. Although I have a memory of being in primary school, actually, and we had to say our times tables out loud. And there was
scary.
My year group, I was only in a small primary school, so it wasn't a big year group. So you're not imagining like 60 kids, you're talking a small amount. Stood in a line in a classroom and we had to say to this teacher our times tables off by heart. And we were all absolutely brilliant at it. And she thought she'd done a brilliant job. But what she didn't realise was on the back of the door was the times tables. And we just stood there and read it to her every week.
That's amazing.
But yeah, no, I was good at memorising stuff. I think I've got a good memory, so I can. But I think that's probably, and that's something that I've unpicked a little bit in some of my books, is memorising maths only gets you so far. You've got to really understand it. And I think that's probably where I struggle. I can try hard, I can learn things. I like to designate a lot of time and do things and work really hard on things. So I think I can get away with it. But then if someone asks me to explain the reasoning, or if I've got it wrong and I've got to unpick how I got it wrong, then I'm like, oh, I don't know. And then I feel a bit stuck. So yeah, and things like speed maths, I don't know if that's a thing, but like maths where you've got to give an answer really quickly or you get put on the spot to answer a question, like cold calling, I was rubbish at that. I would find that really, really stressful even now. But then if I had to write the same one down on a piece of paper, I probably could do it. So I think there's a lot of confidence involved in it.
Yeah, that's probably one of my minor issues with the year 4 multiplication tables check is the fact that it's against the clock, and how necessary is that really? Yes, we want children to have quick recall, but there could probably be a bit more leeway, couldn't there, really, if what you really want to know is whether they know their times tables or not. But I totally feel the same with that terror that you're about to be picked on and need to know an instant answer. I'm still a bit like that now, even as an adult, not necessarily just with maths, but when you're in a meeting or whatever and your boss picks on you to answer a question, still feel that
but then
slight
there's
terror.
wiggle room with that. See, I feel that bit I can do because you've got the wiggle room and you can and you'll notice in the podcast of my answers that I'll use that sort of wiggling technique, but I can't do it with maths. I think that's why it's really tricky. So then, like you say, if the boss says something and asks you about your data, that's when I'd be like, because I'd struggle because there's not the,
you are going to love the quick fire maths questions at the end of this podcast then, Georgina.
I mean, I've got another meeting at that point.
It's just a quick feature I've just come up with on the spot.
Okay, excellent. Very inclusive, Jon.
yeah, that's what I thought. So how did you end up being where you are now, Georgina? Just a quick-fire potted history of...
No, the whole long story then.
Your autobiography. We'll write it on air now. Yeah,
that'd be great. So no, I won't really. So I used to be a teacher. Never wanted to be a teacher. I sort of fell into it, but fell into it early. So fell into it straight after university. So it doesn't really sound like I fell into it, but I did. I was going to do medicine. I was doing biomedical sciences at uni. I was then going to do you could do like a shorter course that then you could do medicine and be a doctor. That was the plan. And then my dissertation for biomedical science, we had like 3 options and 2 of them were lab-based work. I'm not great in a lab. I'm quite clumsy and I like to talk. And both of those things didn't really go well with it. And then the third option was just like a wild card. It was go into an inner city in Leeds and go and teach about drug education. I was like, oh, that one sounds easier. How wrong I was. That one sounds easier. You can just see it kind of I'd be like, oh, that sounds well easy. I'll do that. Anyone can be a teacher. I found that. Don't quote that quote out of context. I don't think anyone can be a teacher and it's an easy job. But yeah, so I thought, oh, that seems like the easier job. It wasn't. It was blooming hard work, but it was brilliant. And I remember coming out of the first lesson, and we won't call it a lesson, and I wasn't really teaching, was I? I was just having a play at it. But came out the first lesson and felt like, I think like a feeling, like a buzz that I've never felt before. And I thought, that's what I need to be doing. I need to be around kids and I need to be doing teaching, because it was fun and it felt like you're making a difference. And yeah, there was something about it. So then I just changed my mind and became a teacher, and then became a SENDCO, because I like helping the children that need a bit more extra support, I suppose, and like making a difference in that side of things. So became a SENDCO, and then written a few books.
And you love paperwork, obviously.
Well, yeah, that side of the data bit and the TA timetable, not so much. But I had support. No, it was fine. But then, yeah, I wrote a few books and been working with Twinkl and etc. So, yeah.
Yeah, became a SENDCO, then wrote a few books and worked with Twinkl and go on, national media and be quoted in newspapers, and that general path that everybody goes down after becoming a teacher. Yeah.
I feel like I gave a lot of information for the bit that probably wasn't as interesting.
No, that's fine. That's fine. We'll leave a little air of mystery around how you progress from that point. You have to be passionate, don't you, to be a SENDCO, I think, about the subject, because just the sheer number of meetings and forms to fill in and observations and all those sorts of things, which are all really important, but it was a huge task. It's a full-time job on its own, I think.
It is. I think I had an afternoon to do it alongside teaching, which I'm sure lots of SENDCOs listening can relate. But yeah, it's a massive job, and it's a difficult job, but it's also brilliant when you get it right and you're helping those learners. So yes, a very rewarding job, but a very difficult one. I think one that needs to be valued a little bit more than it is at the moment.
Yeah, I think that's probably what I was angling towards, was just recognition for all the brilliant SENDCOs out there who are pouring their lives into trying to improve opportunities for children in school.
Yep.
So anybody who is working in school at the moment will be aware of the issues around SEND funding, EHCPs and things. Can you just give us a little bit of a flavour of the challenges that staff might be facing, for parents and things who might be listening who aren't in school at the moment?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's literally why I wrote SEND Strategies for the Primary Years, was because of these issues that teachers are facing at the moment. And, teachers listening, I'm just telling you what you already know, but it's the lack of funding, it's the lack of teaching assistants, it's the long waiting times for assessments, for diagnosis, for education healthcare plans and education healthcare needs assessments, and not enough teaching assistants due to the funding. There's an increase in need that we're seeing as well in lots of schools. Teachers aren't given, contrary to popular belief, they're not given loads of training on SEND. So, teachers, through no fault of their own, haven't been upskilled in teaching children with SEND. And when we've got more diverse learners in the classroom, it's tricky. You've got the pressure from parents, but it's not parents' fault either. They're feeling under a lot of pressure, and I think there's a lot of work to be done between the relationship with home and school. There's delays of EHCPs. There's EHCPs that, let's face it, aren't fit for purpose sometimes, because they're not worth the paper they're written on. Can I say that out loud? There's local authorities not sticking to the rules that they
just have.
That's fine. I've said it all. I could go on. I wrote the whole of the introduction of my book, literally lists out all the problems we've got, and then the fact that we can be doing some things to help. But I think we do need a bit of governmental support.
Yeah, it's interesting what you say about training for teachers. I think in the last few years, we were lucky enough when I was in the classroom to have a brilliant SENDCO who was also very good at training, and he delivered a lot of training to us as a staff. But on my PGCE, I think we had a lecture on SEN, as it was at the time. Just, this is what you need to know, and off you go. Yeah, done. And looking back, I don't think that quite covered everything. Or even an introduction to everything, in 1 hour lecture, surprisingly. Why is that? Why is that changing? Do you know? I don't know whether that's...
I'm trying to change it, genuinely trying to change it. Another book I'm writing, sorry, this is just a self-promotional opportunity here, but another book I'm writing with Routledge at the moment is for for ECTs on SEND called Questions on Send, and it's basically questions answered on SEND because we know they're not getting enough training on special education needs and disabilities.
And as you say, it's a growing need in the classroom. So
it's like 25% of your school population has special education disabilities. It's a massive proportion of the children sitting in front of you in the class. You need to know what difficulties they've got, how you can support them. And I think there's a lot of reluctance as well, and it's, again, nobody's fault, but I think people feel a little bit worried about supporting children with special education needs if they don't fully understand it, because they don't want to do the wrong thing. And I think one thing I'm trying to advocate for is that it doesn't matter about it does matter about a diagnosis for the child and for their support. I get that. But if you've got a child in front of you with some difficulties in a certain area, you can still support them with that difficulty without knowing what it is. And yes,
it's about meeting their needs where they are at the moment.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly that. And I think we need to be a bit more flexible in schools to allow teachers that flexibility and that autonomy to be able to, break the rules a little bit to support children in ways that need to be. Things like flexibility on uniform and, for sensory processing differences. There's all sorts of things that I think we need to be changing to make things a little bit more inclusive, or a lot more inclusive.
Well, you can have that quote from me for free in your book. That's not a problem. I'll send you through the reference later. So just bringing this back round to maths then. And I know you are an SEND specialist, not necessarily a maths specialist, but you also taught maths for lots of years as a teacher. Some teachers might feel uncertain about whether a difficulty is a maths-specific need, like dyscalculia, which I've been learning a lot more about recently, or whether it's part of a broader issue. Do they need to unpick that? And if so, how do they begin to do that? Or is it about what you've just said, really, that you treat the need as you see it?
Yeah, I think it's both, isn't it? I think, they can't diagnose, and they can't begin to make presumptions about diagnosis. So one of the things I was really careful with in SEND strategies for the primary years was making sure, because initially I wanted to split it by like autism, ADHD, dyscalculia, etc., and give tips. But then I was really I got some feedback from somebody, and they were spot on, and I really value their opinion on this, that if you give people those diagnoses, you've got the danger that teachers will accidentally presume a diagnosis and might not be supporting them in other ways because of it. So I think needs are broad. We know that children might have dyscalculia, but also dyslexia, and we know that dyslexia can impact on maths. So I think we have to be really careful to understand where our limits are in terms of diagnosis. But like you say, and like I said in the previous answer, we can be supporting needs regardless of a diagnosis. If you know you've got a child that works better when they've got physical things in front of them to help them understand equations, give them. Do you know what I mean? It's a no-brainer in that sense. And I think we need to be really careful not to just presume. We need to know the diagnosis, and we can't do anything until we know if they've got dyscalculia or if they've officially got maths anxiety or whatever it is. We can be looking at ways we can support them in the meantime. And I think there's a lot to be said about, adaptive teaching works really well, but also things like visuals and manipulatives and helping children to change the pace sometimes when they're in, and changing the grouping and all of these different things we can be doing to support children. It would be my answer. So I don't think they need to know exactly what it is, but they also do need to flag it to the right people to then go and find out if it is that, because I think for the child, it's important for them to understand why they're finding things difficult. And we know for children who've grown up with, say, a dyslexia diagnosis, and then they find out when they're 18 or something, they get this diagnosis that they've got dyslexia, and they wish they'd have known that sooner. Yeah. And I think for their understanding of themselves, it's important. Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting what you just said there. A lot of those strategies, and this is not a new revelation to me, but a lot of those strategies are things that just form part of good teaching anyway, don't they? Having manipulatives for children, we talk about that all the time in maths lessons, how important it is just for developing understanding of the structures behind the maths, thinking about your groupings, thinking about how the amount of time, that differentiating time perhaps for answering questions and things. That's and thinking about the scaffolds that you can put in place to help support pupils. That's just good teaching, isn't it?
Yeah, It is good teaching, absolutely. And I think there needs to be on top of that, like an understanding of when they need a little bit more and what more you can be providing them. But one thing as well, I think is really important when we're thinking about maths, especially maths, I think, is that sort of high expectations for all your students. And that, especially with maths, because you can be really good at memorizing your times tables, but but you might find another area of maths like shapes really difficult because there's such maths is an unusual one, isn't it? There's so many different types of maths that just because you're not good at one area doesn't mean you can fly at another area. And especially if you've got a special educational need that limits or makes it difficult for you to do certain parts of maths, it doesn't mean the other maths you're going to find tricky. Does that make sense, what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, no, it totally makes sense. Yeah.
Spiky profile when it comes to maths, and we need to have high expectations across the board and not just limit children based on what you think their previous score in maths is or what you think their area of difficulties with maths is.
Yeah, and just going sort of beyond that from what you were saying earlier about being careful not to diagnose children yourself, I would say it's fairly unusual to find a child that only you might find a child that finds maths difficult but excels in other areas of the curriculum. But I think it would be quite unusual, even if they had something like dyscalculia that was diagnosed by somebody, that is still going to impact other areas of the curriculum. And, equally, if they've got a diagnosis of dyslexia, that's not limited to just English lessons, is it? That's also going to have an impact on other things like working memory and those things.
Yeah, and times tables, I think we forget that lots of dyslexic learners find times tables really difficult, and that's one to be aware of as well. So so there is like two strands to it, isn't it? It's like the support you can put in place yourself and not to be afraid to put them in place, but then also having it at the back of your mind thinking, could it be that? And who do I need to speak to and flag it to?
There's been a move towards a teaching for mastery approach in maths, particularly for many years now, in England certainly, but also across the UK, where we're having a focus really on, as you were saying, having those high expectations for every learner and trying to minimise gaps opening up between those who find maths difficult and those who find maths a lot easier to access. I'm moving away from I need to be careful how I say this because it can be misconstrued, but moving away from just having a set, 3 or 4 ways of differentiation within the class, red tables and blue tables and green tables, etc. And really trying to have the whole class working on the same concept, but with support in place for those who need it and additional layers of challenge potentially for those who might finish the work a little quicker or grasp it more quickly. Where that can sometimes break down is where you have a pupil who is working well below the age-related expectation.
Yeah.
Is it still inclusive to try and get them to be doing the same as everybody else, or is that a false sort of inclusion where you're trying to make them do work that they're not quite ready for yet, do you think, in your opinion?
That's a really good point, and I think it would depend on the. I'm having a cop out.
It's difficult. I know. I didn't give you this question ahead of time. I was just throwing it at you as it's come to me. But it's one that, it's one that people ask me about quite a lot, and I think it's interesting. And as you say, it's not one size fits all, is it? It's going to depend on the child and that sort of thing.
No, but I think we are guilty of rushing children through a curriculum, again, through no fault of teachers, it's the pressures we're under, isn't it? But rushing them through the curriculum and the things they've got to rather than thinking about the understanding. And if we're saying that the key to this isn't remembering, it's understanding it fully and that mastery approach, then do we need to change the pace a little bit? Do we need to be adaptive? But I think as well is thinking about what other strategy is it that we need to be putting other things in place? Do they need the concept sort of given in a different way? Do we need to be using more visuals, more symbols, more? Do we need to be doing it verbally? Do we need to be writing it down? Like, are there different ways they can express their understanding that we're limiting them with, or are there different ways that we can express it to them that's limiting them? And I think, thinking outside the box a little bit and working out the reasons why they're struggling with it would be good, because obviously I wouldn't advocate for them not being part of what everybody else is doing, but I do understand that equally we shouldn't be pushing them through stuff that they're finding really tricky, because what is the benefit to them? I think we always need to look back at the individual child and think, what is the benefit to them? Is that the benefit to them to be rushed through and to go on to the next topic, not there yet, and balancing it out with ensuring they're included within the main lessons. It's a tricky one, and I appreciate it's a balancing act.
I think there's probably a case as well for, as you said before, that spiky profile. There may be some topics and units where they absolutely can access the lesson with support, and some other topics and units where maybe they need to be working on something that's at their age and stage developmentally appropriate level, so that they can then try and catch up later potentially. Because as you said earlier, maths is one of those tricky subjects because it builds sequentially over time, and if you're missing fundamental concepts, then it can be quite difficult to take the next step and make it purposeful. So yeah, I totally agree in that idea of looking at the child, what can they, what's appropriate for them at this moment in time, at this particular unit, and not making, just like we're moving away from making judgments about, well, they're on the green table, so therefore they're doing this work today. Actually looking at each child in each unit and thinking what's appropriate for them at this point.
Yeah.
Okay. What about thinking about language and oracy in making maths more accessible to pupils with SEND? You did sort of touch on a couple of ideas just then. I'll just wonder if we could unpick those a little bit further.
Interesting one, isn't it? Because, and I think there's a whole thing about reading as well that links in nicely, because we know that dyslexic students, for example, might find some bits of maths really easy, but then when you have the wordy questions, and that might be later on as they're going through school, they suddenly start to struggle and find it difficult. And it's, what are we testing them? Are we testing them here on their reading ability, or are we actually testing on their maths? And I think that sort of links in nicely with the language part of it as well. So you've got to think of children with speech language communication needs, and if we're limiting them when we're asking questions and the way we're doing that, can we support through visuals? Can we make sure all of those good strategies that would support a child with language difficulties, I think is really important. But also, I think maths can be guilty for using different terminology, and that can make it really difficult for children. Even, and especially as well, like, I sound like I'm just slating maths. I love maths, really, honest. But I think as well, like, it changes. So parents at home might be using different terminology to school, and that consistency is so important for lots of children. Even as simple as take away and minus. We presume they're interchangeable. The not don't unpick this, because maybe they're not interchangeable, and a whole maths thing that I don't know here. But in my head, they're interchangeable.
There are definitely synonyms, aren't there, in maths that can be used interchangeably. Yeah, let's go with that.
Okay. So yeah, for those ones, and we're using them interchangeably in school, that can be really difficult for a child, and we can simplify it by using consistent language across the board. But then that needs to be a buy-in across school, needs to be communication with home, giving parents the keywords that we're using, and try and use these same keywords that we're using to help with that and make it more inclusive, I think.
And I often make the analogy with phonics, actually, because we introduced a whole new language for phonics with phonemes and graphemes and trigraphs and digraphs and all that good stuff that I certainly wasn't part of my diet of language when I was growing up and going to primary school myself. And as a teacher, I had to learn it, even though I spent most of my career in Key Stage 2, Upper Key Stage 2, and never really applied it very much. So children, but giving those specific labels to specific things makes it much easier to be able to talk about those things and understand them. And so I think you're totally right. There's definitely something about maths. We're introducing words like that you may not have come across, but subtrahend and minuend, to talk about different parts of a subtraction. So in a subtraction, say you've got 4, take away 3. The minuend, I need to get this the right way around, but the minuend would relate to the 4, and the subtrahend would relate to the 3, so that you can say those words just like you would say the phoneme or the grapheme or the digraph or the trigraph, so that you have got a specific label for a specific part of the equation so that you can talk about it. And my belief, Georgina, is that teachers find that harder to get their head around than the children would if it was introduced earlier. And if it was introduced earlier, they would have a better understanding and a better ability to talk about what they don't understand as well.
Yeah. But I'm just thinking
Rather
as a
than
parent,
just saying the 4 and the 3 and the 1, the first number and the second number, the bigger number, the smaller number, like it. There's
yeah,
lots of confusion potentially in how you talk about these fairly simple concepts. And you're right as parents, but we seem to have done that with phonics. You know, I know we don't always get as parents the sounds right. You still get lots of parents saying "duh" instead of, you know, the sound that you're supposed to make for a D.
you make that sound.
Or no, no. But
Oh, that's
instead
brilliant.
of saying "sir," you could say I know that one. Yeah, thank you. So that's patronising. But do you know what I mean, though? We've managed to convey that to parents about phonics in most cases. It's not
Yeah.
perfect, but it's definitely better understood, I think. And I think there's a possibility or the opportunity to do that with maths as well, so that we're demystifying it a bit.
Yeah, because I'm thinking, like, in schools, you know, we have phonics workshops for parents. We invite them in. We talk to them about phonics. We send stuff home. Are we doing that for maths? I don't think we are we?
Sometimes, but I think the issue with maths might be that, as you said before, it's such a big subject and wide ranging. You know, if you're looking at reading, if you're in reception, and I suppose reception have got the opportunity because the reception profile for maths or the foundation stage profile for maths is relatively narrow now, which is great. You know, you really look at numbers to 10 and how you can make those numbers and things. So I think you do have that opportunity there. It's just later it expands so much. You know, if you're
Yeah.
looking at the skill of reading, yes, it's multifaceted, but there's a lot less subject knowledge maybe that needs to go along with it, and to try and get parents to on the same board. I'm going to make a little plug for the Twinkl concept videos here, because they're free to access and they're brilliant when it comes to this sort of stuff. And if you want to try and engage parents with particular strategies or particular subject knowledge on maths, then accessing the concept videos on the Twinkl site is a great starting point. I realise we've gone off on a massive tangent here, but I do think it's important to think about how we can get this language into everyday life in school and at home, as you say, because it would help all learners.
Yeah, because it would be so confusing if you're a child and you're hearing completely different language at school. Maybe not completely different, but quite different language at school to what you're hearing at home. And really frustrating for parents who are trying their best to support a child who might be finding maths particularly difficult. And they might
Yeah.
find maths difficult themselves as well. And then, yeah, with the language and the difficulties around that, I think, yeah, there's a lot we could be doing. I say we, the royal, you guys could be doing.
Yeah. There's some really interesting research that came out just this year about the impact of parents and parents who, again, we don't want to diagnose this, but parents who might find maths anxiety inducing and may have their own struggles around maths, the impact that can have on their children, even if their children's maths ability, however you measure that, isn't particularly impaired, but just the fact that maths hasn't been portrayed or talked about in a particular way at home, that it can impact a child's education for the next 5 years after starting school, which is huge. So yeah, trying to get parents on board, I think, and having positive messages around maths is really important.
I think that's for teachers as well, Jon, because I do think like that framing bit, I remember reading that art. I don't think maybe it was you that sent it me. I actually quoted it in my book.
Yeah.
I think it was. It was probably you, and it ended up as a reference in my book. But I remember putting in there about the importance of framing, not just for parents in the way they frame their like attitudes towards maths and maths in general, but for teachers, because it can only take like a little slip of the tongue of saying, you know, I've got to hate maths. I've said it in this podcast how many times? The way I'm framing maths on here isn't great. I'm saying it, but I'm doing it.
It's okay. I'm going to edit it all out later. It's fine.
She's really positive about it. But
yeah,
our experiences of maths and at school, you know, we do end up sharing it, don't we? And people, I think it's quite common for you to hear people saying, "Oh, I'm rubbish at maths," or "I hate maths." You don't hear it so much about other subjects, and I think, there's a bit of promotion needed on maths to make people
maths
feel more
and geography for some reason. I'm gonna team up maths and geography. They're the two that seem to be stereotyped. Okay, just pulling this back round to SEND for a moment, if you don't mind, if that's all right.
That's where you've got me.
We're just thinking about maths leadership then, because if you were a maths leader in school at the moment, you know that SEND is high profile at the moment for obvious reasons. We know that there are huge issues around EHCPs, just applying for them, let alone what happens if they are eventually granted. And access to services and educational psychologists and, just support in general. Would you advise the maths lead? Of course you would, but how can they build a better relationship with the SENDCO? What could they sorts of things do you think they could work on together to try and support staff and pupils at school?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question, and I think it's tricky. I think a lot of it is obviously your obvious ones like good communication and communication of different goals that you'll have and listening to each other, etc. But it all sounds a little bit patronising, so I'll be careful on that. But I think as a SENDCO, you almost want not to actually do this, but you almost want to make yourself redundant. And I genuinely don't. I'm not saying we need to make SENDCOs redundant. They are very, very valuable, but it can't. The expertise for special educational needs cannot just be on one person's shoulder in the school. That's unfeasible, unsustainable, is not the right method. What they actually need to be doing is upskilling every single member of staff across the whole school to be experts in their area about SEND. So then everyone is an expert in SEND, and that needs to be the way. So I would say a lot of it would be thinking about math-specific difficulties. We've touched on them with dyscalculia, with maths anxiety, but also looking at other ones that impact like dyslexia and many more. And thinking, how do they impact on maths in particular? What can they be doing? And how can they massively upskill themselves to be the expert in SEND and maths? And literally everybody, because we're talking 25% of the school population, you can't not be an expert in maths if you want to be a good teacher, basically, would be my recommendation. Each area needs to be taking on board that. And no, I don't want the SENDCO to actually be made redundant, but that sort of idea that they're not, everything doesn't fall to them when it comes to special educational needs, that everyone has expertise in it and can be relied upon.
I think that's a really, really valid point. And I know as a maths lead, I would often have staff come and ask me, why we're teaching it like this, and then I would explain that. But also, I've got this pupil, they're struggling with this, and I might then go to the SENDCO and say, I've had a conversation about a pupil like this. Is there anything? And that way, next time that happens, if they do have something, or they can refer me to another resource or something, as you say, I've upskilled myself then at that point, that next time that conversation happens, I can help without having to go back to them. So, yeah, I think that's a really, really good idea, Georgina, to have, lots of SEND experts in school in their own little
Yeah, because you talk,
subjects.
25% of the children, and they need to be. They can't just be. You can't just be looking at the other ones and
No,
not be
no.
an expert in them. You need to be looking at all the children and being able to support them that way. And wouldn't it be brilliant if you've got a member of staff who's thinking, right, I think this child has dyscalculia, they've got some real difficulties in this area, not diagnosing them, but think they've got some areas of need. And they go to the SENDCO plus the maths leads, or sometimes they just go to the maths leads because they can trust that, and the SENDCO can trust that the maths lead has had, some extra training, they're upskilled in that area and they are the expert in that. And for the SENDCO to then sort of relinquish some of that expertise and allow the maths lead to then lead a CPD on maths and SEND. And I just think it could be wonderful if everybody took it on board. And I appreciate there's lots of logistics and funding and time and all of that gets in the way, but I do think it's really important.
Yeah, ultimately, you've got these children, all the children in your class at that time, and they all deserve to have the best access to the best teaching that they can have. I think it would be fantastic for maths leads to be able to go away and find out some of this stuff. There are brilliant resources out there. If you are interested in dyscalculia, the Dyscalculia Network is a great resource that you can go to upskill yourself a little bit, but also just bearing in mind that you don't have to have all the answers immediately. And you are working with other professionals, and other people will have their their own ability to go and find things out, but you can be a sounding board for things, I guess.
Yeah.
And if you need to go away and do a bit of research and come back with some, not answers, but things to try, I guess.
Yeah. I also think an untapped resource, if you like, is parents. I think we talk a lot about parents being, these excellent, they're experts in their child, but we don't talk enough about them being experts in their child's specific educational need as well. Because thanks to the internet, thanks to books, thanks to everything, if you've got a parent who's got a child who's autistic, or a parent who's got a dyslexic child, they will have read likely a lot of stuff about dyslexia and autism, and they may well be experts in that area. And I think we're forgetting, we're sat across from them in parents' evening, forgetting that actually they know way more about this than we do, and we shouldn't have pride or whatever it is getting in our way of fear of them thinking we don't know enough, when actually they could tell us some strategies. They could tell us, what are they doing with maths at home that's making it accessible for their child? Is there anything we can learn from them? Because I bet there's loads.
I often used to have more of those parents come to me when they felt their children were gifted and talented and telling me how they should be doing maths at school. But you're absolutely right. That a closer working relationship with parents generally, it's got to be a good thing, hasn't it?
Absolutely.
In most cases, you would suggest. Last question, Georgina, because I know you are ridiculously busy, and I'm very grateful that you've found the time to come and talk to us today. But if a teacher's listening to this and they wanted to do one thing tomorrow to make their maths lessons more inclusive, and who wouldn't want that, what would you recommend they could do?
Oh, one thing.
I'll let you have two things if you like, but
4?
yeah,
I'm not
yeah,
great at maths.
yeah,
I
that's fine.
I think it's a lot of things we said already, but I think so. I'll say it quick, and then it sounds like one thing. How we frame numeracy. So really thinking about how we talk about numeracy, try to not make it sound terrifying and scary and something that we all dislike. Our negative view can massively impact on children's negative view of maths. We need to be raising their confidence, not praising effort, not just achievement, all of that sort of stuff to really make them love maths if we can. I think repetition's really important. I don't mean repetition for the sake of it, but explanations and activities, letting them go through them again if they're finding them a little bit tricky. Working on understanding, not memorising, like we said. So, it can quickly become very complicated, maths, if you rely, I've done this myself, I think, quickly become very, very complicated if you just rely on remembering facts, because suddenly you get lost. You can't rely on remembering it for very long. And I think, really helping support children understand it. And then the last one would be around language and realising that it's a whole new language to some children. And if you're a child with speech language communication needs, it can be really tricky. And I think we need to do a lot of work around that, would be my ideas. I've got more.
Probably a book's worth, I would imagine.
There is a chapter. There is a chapter on numeracy.
Well, I was just about to say, Georgina, if listeners want to find out more about you and your work, where is a good place to start?
That's a good point. You can find me on social media. I'm quite active, should we say, on social media. Find me, you'll find me easily. But and have a look at my books. That would be lovely. Send Strategies for the Primary Years is probably the most relevant one. And the secondary years one is out in March.
Exciting. That's brilliant. Right. Thank you so much, Georgina. I really appreciate your time today. And I know the listeners will have found things really useful as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much.